Recording in progress.
There we go. And it is all yours, Tara.
All right, wonderful. So thank you so much for having me, especially, having me come in and just talk about, I guess some things related to what I'm going to be talking about today, specifically focused on attachment parenting and parenting when parents have been separated. And when I initially connected with Lola over email, she kind of threw out some suggestions, and I'm like, oh, even with this subject, I mean, I could probably go on for days about parenting, about attachment, about children's development and what that means, and issues that can come up, especially when parents are separated. So I know that I will likely be relying on all of you to tell me what's helpful for you during this. So if you, I think that there is a chat feature if you want to, just kind of note some questions as we're going throughout. I'll try to catch them the best I can to make sure that I'm addressing the things that are important for you. Otherwise, I'm just going to give you general information. I don't know if that's necessarily useful. Let me see. I'm going to share my screen here. And as you get to know me really quick, what you're going to learn about me is that I hate PowerPoint. So my PowerPoint slides are likely not very helpful for reference. I will just say that they are mostly helpful for me. Whenever I teach classes, I just have some kind of bullet points. I've got a slide for you. So please know that if you may want to take notes if you find the information helpful, because my PowerPoint slides just don't ever have a ton of information. I just know myself. So I think I have a total of 5 slides or 6 slides, and that first one was one of them. So in really kind of thinking about what I wanted to focus on today is the idea of attachment in parenting, and what is attachment? How do children develop relationships with parents, with caregivers, with peers? What does that look like over time? And then in situations where parents have been separated, what are some of the things that children families can run into? So I first just want to kind of define what I was going to be talking about first, which what is attachment? So attachment is an enduring emotional bond between two people in which each person seeks closeness and feels more secure within the presence of the attachment figure. So when we talk about attachment, we're talking in a lot of ways about how children form attachments with caregivers. You'll also notice some parallels about how adults form attachments with each other. I certainly will talk about that as well. Attachment theory is a very, it's just so big and complex, so I know I'm not going to cover everything, but of course, please let me know as we're continuing if you do have any questions here. So when do attachments form? I wouldn't say like attachments necessarily form in a children's earliest weeks of life. Between birth and 6 weeks, children don't necessarily form attachments to any one person. But there's something that really interesting that happens with children, even in the earliest weeks of life. So children as young as 2 weeks start to distinguish who takes care of me and who does not take care of me. Who might not be a person who will comfort me and who is. One of the stories that's kind of, when I was learning this, that came up was that a mother had just given birth and but also had a 3-year-old little girl. And the 3-year-old little girl was a bit cheeky and a bit playful and let's just say a bit rough. And the 3-year-old would do things like, throw her stuffed animals at the little baby. And not hard, but, enough to annoy the child. But the child figured out, this little baby figured out really quick that when that 3-year-old came in the room to start screaming and mom would come in. And that happens really early. So children start to distinguish between people within these first early weeks. A lot of that just comes with like developmental changes. Typically, it takes a couple of weeks for children's eyesight to come in. They start to recognize differences between tones and voices. So really early on, kids can distinguish things, but they don't necessarily know that like mom feeds me, right? They just know that this person is a person who can comfort me. Between 6 weeks and 6 months, children are going to start really exploring their relationships with other people. So children do develop what is considered a preference for a primary caregivers, and they can identify secondary caregivers. So children will identify, if I see mom or dad, mom and dad will feed me, mom or dad will clothe me, mom and dad will hold me. So really early with their parents, they'll identify these primary caregivers, and they'll also be able to distinguish people that are that they are close to, people that they see a lot, people that they're familiar with. So even babies can recognize familiar others, like grandparents. If there's like a caregiver who comes in, oftentimes children will form a relationship with them, and that's considered secondary. So really early on, children start to distinguish, who is my primary, who is my secondary, and the differences between these folks. As kids get older, and we're still talking about babies, so with 6 months, one of the really popular early theories about attachment, and I always feel like I got to talk about this, is that as children are developing primary preferences for caregivers, that was typically only towards one specific caregiver, and that was towards the mom. And so in really early theories that began, I want to say in the 80s, that was the attachment theory of a baby is going to form a primary attachment with mom and could not possibly form any attachments to others. The researcher who developed that theory went back a few years later and said, actually, I learned some more things. I actually learned that even infants and babies can form multiple primary attachments. So that may mean that even young children around 6 months old form an attachment to mom, form an attachment to dad, maybe form an attachment to somebody else who's spending a lot of time caring for them, whether that's a family member or other caregiver. So I definitely always want to kind of bring up that there's a theory that's pretty old. It's been around a long time, but children do start to form bonds with preferred caregivers, with other folks in their lives. They can distinguish, who takes care of me most of the time and some of the time, so they really kind of explode in their awareness and understanding. So let me see here. So as children get older, and kids are so fun. So between 1 and 6 years, I know that's a big jump in development, but kids really, really quickly learn who meets what needs. We see this even in young children. So children may learn that mom will feed me. I should go for mom for snacks. But if I want to wrestle, I got to go to dad, right? And they'll figure that out really, really quickly. Because they do this, even young children will seek out certain caregivers depending on really what they need in the moment. So like, there's certain likes, there's certain dislikes, their needs and their preferences. For young children, it's really like, what they need in that moment. For parents who may be separated, this often, I see this create often a lot of anxiety in parents where, if a child feels sick, I would say, one of the most common things, if a child feels sick, they want mom. Doesn't matter where they're at, if they're at school, if they're at mom's house, or they're at dad's house or grandma's house, they just want mom. And that doesn't mean that anybody else is bad. That doesn't mean that dad's bad or teacher's bad or anything else. It just means that the child doesn't feel good and they want the person who takes care of them when they're sick. so that we would call that a preference, and children definitely do that. If a kiddo wants to, have, if a kiddo's in trouble with mom, here's kind of the other end. If a kiddo gets in trouble with a parent, they'll often prefer the other parent because they're not in trouble with that parent. So we see children go back and forth between parents or caregivers. Children in early ages also learn really quickly how to use this to their advantage. So if they ask mom for a cookie and mom tells them no, what children will often try is they'll say, hey, dad, can I have a cookie? And if dad isn't paying attention, then we all know how that goes. During these years, children are establishing their role in the family. So in these early years, a kiddo is likely to experience a lot of changes. They may, they may have more siblings, come into the family as they get a little bit older. As families grow, parents can move, parents' work hours can change. They may start going to school. So these children experience a lot of life changes and are really trying to figure out, who am I within the family? Am I an oldest sibling? Am I the baby of the family? Am I a boy? Am I a girl? Who do I connect with? Who understands me in this family? What are the rules of the family? So they're really trying to figure all of these things out in these early years. And we know that children do best when they are able to be children. So first off, when they have stability and consistency, a lot of consistency, routine, and structure in their lives. And we know that young children do best when they feel like they're doing well within their role. So if they're helping out a sibling or if they're doing well at school. So really giving children praise in these early years really helps them develop that sense of self-esteem and how they connect with other people in the family. In these early years, we see this in many ages, but these are kind of the years where a child may develop what's called an affinity with a caregiver. So an affinity is something that is very, very common. It happens in all types of households, whether parents are together or separate. And it basically means that a child has a preference for a particular parent or caregiver. We see this a lot with same gendered parents and children. So girls typically have more of an affinity towards moms. Boys typically have more of an affinity towards dads. But of course, we have the, kind of like the daddy's girl concept. I mean, it's not 100%, but we kind of know, and I think this is often very hard for parents if they are not kind of the selected or preferred or the person that the child has developed that affinity for. It can feel a lot like rejection, especially in those early years, but it is very common. Children just recognize that they may have more in common with a certain parent. It's developmentally appropriate, and it doesn't mean that they don't love the other parent or don't connect with the other parent. It just means that they need the other parent for different things. And that is awesome that the other parent can provide that. So when we see that, just know that it's very, very common. It doesn't necessarily mean that there's anything wrong. Oops, let me go back with that. So as kids get older, of course, ages 8 to 11 years, these are the ages where if there's going to be a dysfunctional relationship with a parent or caregiver, these are the years where it's pretty obvious. In the work that I do with families, I'm really mindful of these years, and most of the work I do is with children kind of between the 10 and 14-year-old range when I work with families where there's a parent-child contact issue. And I know it starts within these kind of middle years and goes into, it really intensifies over time. So I would say kids in the 8 to 11 year, kind of that preteen age group, what they're doing developmentally is they're separating from their parents. They're not doing this as much as typically adolescents or teenagers do, but they're really kind of trying to figure out, who am I within my peer group? Who are my friends? Who is my best friend? And these are often the years where we'll see a lot of competition in children. They all of a sudden, they start to care what clothes they wear, what brands they have, what gaming console there is. These are the years where that becomes really, really important to kids. And you will see this competition. It also happens with siblings. So that can be really common. Kind of in brain development, children within these years are very concrete in their thinking. So it's kind of it's either this or that. And so they're very preoccupied with fairness, especially in interactions with their parents. They're going to be paying a lot of attention to the rules of the house, and notice, is my parent following the rules that they've set for me? So they're, that can be really, really common. In situations where parents are separated, kids will often seek fairness in both homes or in parent decisions, even though those may not necessarily be shared. But that becomes a pretty significant preoccupation for kids in this areas. They want to make sure that everybody's happy, everybody's doing okay, everything is fair, and that's how they understand that relationships work, is we're really kind of in that black and white mindset. Children are, like I said, children are most susceptible in these ages to dysfunctional relationships with parents and caregivers. Why is that the case? Well, it's probably because of where they are developmentally, especially with their brain development. They can't consider multiple options. They're still not great at noticing consequences. That kind of concrete thinking, very black and white, things are in absolutes, all or nothing thinking is another way to say it. So we see a couple of things that can start in these ages. So the first one on this list is enmeshment. And enmeshment in a parent-child relationship is pretty, when we see it, it is pretty concerning. Enmeshment means that that something has happened in which the parent is relying on the child to meet their emotional needs. And so we, especially within the context of separated parents, parents are often frustrated in situations where there's divorce, where maybe there's a lot of conflict in co-parenting, and are voicing their concerns. And because children want to please their parents, they will be more than happy to listen to these concerns. But what we find is that in those situations, it's emotionally unhealthy for children. And this can it doesn't always, it can turn into a reliance by a parent to really use the child's resources to help them meet their own emotional needs. Other things that kind of come up within the same kind of umbrella are things like parentification. So where a child is placed in or given like a role within the family where they may be in charge of other children. I've also seen situations where children are placed as a kind of given a role as a person who takes care of a parent. Maybe a parent has a special need, physical need or mental health need, or maybe there's a substance use issue and the child is now managing the goings on of the home. This is really where they'll start to come into that role within these kind of middle-aged years. Can you give an example of enmeshment? That was a question that was asked. Absolutely. So the example I gave with a parent emotionally relying on their child. So they'll say, maybe they're frustrated. I'll just give an example of separated parents. Parent gets a text from their ex and it's not very nice. And they go, oh God, I hate that guy. He's such a jerk. Makes me so mad. Don't you agree, kiddo? And the kiddo goes, yeah. That's what we would call kind of a pattern. If we see that pattern over time, where really that boundary that's not a healthy boundary, it's like a bad, kind of an unhealthy boundary, we would consider that enmeshment if it happens over a prolonged period of time. Hoping I answered your question. So alignment, the next one on this list, alignment is a lot different than affinity. So affinity is, it's really, we see it a lot. It's not necessarily a cause for concern. Alignment is, when we're looking at dysfunctional relationships with parents. Alignment is when a child will basically take on the opinions of their parent, opinions and positions of their parent. So whenever I hear a child say something to the effect of, I'll give you an example of probably a common one that I see. Whenever I hear a child say something like, oh, well, this parent isn't paying their child support, that's not an appropriate child-centered position, and it's likely that they're aligning with their parent's concern. What does that, why is that dysfunctional? Well, in a lot of ways, it means that there are concerning boundaries where children are being exposed to adult information. It also means that the child is losing sense of their own identity and that it is in alignment with their parents. So really they're saying, my identity is the same as my parent, and what they're not doing, which is what they should be doing in these years, is really developing their own identity, really defining who they, start defining who they are as a person, because they're relying so heavily on the opinions and beliefs of the parent. So this is what's considered a dysfunctional relationship. There are lots of reasons why children will align with parents. I don't know if I can get into all those reasons today, but I just definitely wanted to give an overview. And then resistance, which is probably the opposite of alignment as far as a dysfunctional relationship. So resistance is, it's considered kind of an extreme, basically what it says, extreme resistance to time with a parent, a rejection of a parent. So we consider this a dysfunctional relationship, and resistance can be what's considered justified, where maybe there's been an event or situation that's happened and the child said, hey, this wasn't okay. I didn't feel safe in this situation, and this is why I don't want to spend time with a parent. We consider, if all that has happened, that would be considered justified. There's also unjustified resistance. So maybe a child is being, trying to keep a parent happy, or maybe they're heavily aligned with a parent and they're showing resistance. So when we see these sort of extreme views, we know that there's likely a dysfunctional relationship happening within the family. And like I said, it's really going to start showing up in these kind of later school age years between 8 and 11. I'm going to talk about a few more items with the dysfunctional relationships, but I know just kind of being mindful of time, I gotta move on here. So in teenage years, we see a lot of changes with kids. And as we watch children, we kind of see them ramping up to do this. So teens are developmentally, the goal for a lot of teenagers, goal for really every teen, is to establish their identity, separate from the parental and family unit, and really start to establish who they are as an individual and move towards their own future. That is a teenager's job. The way that shows up is that teenagers tend to fight more with their parents. This is actually developmentally great for them. If a teenager is not fighting with their parent, they're actually not going to develop some essential skills. And I can't believe I'm saying that, but that is absolutely true. When teens fight with a parent, they're going to learn some really good things. What they're going to learn is that everybody has arguments, and that it's okay to have disagreements with people. If done well, they're also going to learn that it's okay to be angry with somebody, but that we can resolve conflict and come and be able to come back together again and heal from any conflict that happened. So teenagers do argue, they do fight more with their parents, but within the process of that, they're learning some essential relationship skills. If there are situations where maybe that's not being handled very well, what teens learn could be things like, well, if I get mad at somebody, I can shut down and walk away, which is going to hurt them in their first relationships, or that we don't talk about problems in this house. And so they may learn some of those essential skills. So as children or as teens are developing that independence, we want to make sure that we are really emphasizing the skills that they're going to need as an adult, which means that we want to help them grow, but not treat them like an adult. They're not there yet. Where teenagers are in their development, they care about friends. They care so much about friends. Friends become way more important than their family, their parents, their teachers, anybody. So we really want to make sure that, of course, they're with good, great, healthy friends. But I do tell parents all the time that if you don't create space for children to foster those relationships with friends, you're going to have a problem with your teenager. You're just going to be fighting with your teen. Teenagers do need to learn boundaries, like that they got to get homework done, that there's probably a curfew. All those things are absolutely true. But in situations where teens, if given the option, if teens want to hang out with their family or their friends, they're going to choose their friends every single time. So when it comes to the context of like separated parents, I see this a lot, especially when a parent doesn't have a whole lot of time with a kiddo. Let's say that a parent only has every other weekend, and the only thing that teenagers want to do on weekends is hang out with their friends. And so there's a feeling of rejection by the parent, like, hey, why aren't you hanging out with me? Or, the teen just doesn't want to come over, not necessarily because they don't like the parent, they just want to hang out with their friends. And then there's a lot of fights about where that teenager should be. What I advise parents is, if you want to have a relationship with your teenager, you've got to create that space and really work with your teenager on how you can help them maintain those connections with friends, but also create a space where you can have time with them. And if a parent has really limited time, with like the example of every other weekend, that can be very difficult to do. So I totally get that can be a reality. And in these years, if there is a dysfunctional relationship, it is often going to intensify and then carry over into the early years of adulthood. So things like, let's just say that there's a lot of resistance to a parent. These are the years where I would typically see children resist time with a parent so that they're not going over to a parent's house. If they're aligned with a parent and they're old enough, they may go into a role where they're taking care of a parent or managing the home or even taking the place of another parent. So that kind of idea of enmeshment and parentification. So we really see these are the years where if there's a dysfunctional relationship, now it's playing out where it's really causing a lot of turmoil within the family and a lot of I would say like emotional turmoil within the teen and the family. So it's really difficult for teens to even manage school and friends and family if there's a dysfunctional relationship happening. So maintaining relationships with children after parent separation. I know I want to talk more about this. And Lola, could you please remind me how much time I have just so I can be mindful of that?
Yeah, it's 6:04 right now, so about 25 minutes.
Okay, I definitely want to leave some time for questions, so I will get, this is very information dense, I'll do what I can. Maintaining relationships with children after parental separation. This is something that when Lola had initially reached out to me, I knew that this was something that I wanted to focus on. So I know I spent a lot of time earlier in our talk today about attachment and developmental norms. So I'm not gonna repeat that. But there's so much on developmental norms for children and children in different ages. And I just encourage parents to get as much information as you can. There are some things that are so normal for children of a certain age, but unless you know, you don't know. So I always encourage parents to get that education, because there can be some weird things that show up that are totally normal. Things like lying or, even sexual development, just when those things up. So I encourage education. And then how do we maintain relationships with children after separation? We want to increase parenting competence. So in thinking about parenting competence, there are typically 3 areas, and that's likely the easiest way to break it down. So there are nurturing skills, teaching skills, and co-parenting skills. So nurturing skills are things like, how am I attending to the child's needs? How am I showing this child that I'm proud of them? How am I encouraging this child to explore and be curious and develop skills? How am I providing appropriate praise? How am I just taking care of their basic needs? Because that happens too. There's also teaching skills. And teaching skills can be the values and those types of things that we definitely want to teach our kids, but the teaching skills are also how we are responding to situations, because our children are watching us all of the time. So when I'm assessing teaching skills, a part of my job is I do conduct evaluations for family court, and I look at all these things. As I'm assessing teaching skills, some of the things I'm looking at are things like, how is a parent managing when they get upset? What does their emotional expression look like? If a parent has a problem, how are they working through that? Because we, as parents, parents are the model for their children. And so everything that parents do, children are definitely being mindful of. And so I always caution parents to be careful what they're teaching their children, because they will definitely learn. And then the third skill is co-parenting skills. And why would this fall within maintaining relationships with children after parent separation? Because what we know of co-parenting skills is that when parents are able to work together positively for the benefit of their children adjust really well to separation. They feel like they can go to both parents for their needs, and as things come up for changes in their lives. We know that when information is positively shared, if a kiddo gets in trouble at one parent's house, it's being carried over to the other. And so both parents' role is being honored and not undermined. And so that information being shared, parents, co-parents showing respect to each other, helping each other out, really fostering that helps children positively adjust. If on the other end, if there's a lot of conflict in the co-parenting relationship, we definitely see that in when I see professionals who work a lot with children and families. If there's a lot of conflict in a co-parent relationship, then that definitely just has an effect on children. And not all parents are great to work with. I get, if you got a co-parent with another person and that person isn't cooperative, I totally understand how that can be frustrating. But really developing the skills on how we can navigate that, even if we're working with maybe a really frustrating co-parent, we can still do what we need to do to make sure we have the skills to have that impart those benefits onto the children, so that they are able to adjust in this situation. So with that, I wanted to talk about restrictive gatekeeping versus facilitative gatekeeping. And this is, I talk about this term a whole lot, and it probably, I know the way it sounds, it's, I feel like it's very academic and very boring. But gatekeeping is the idea I always imagine a door, effectively. Restrictive gatekeeping in co-parenting means that a parent is behaving in such a way that restricts a parent's time with children. Facilitative gatekeeping means that parents are acting in such a way to facilitate or support a parent's time with children. So as I talked about, children do benefit the most. They experience the most positive adjustment to their overall well-being when parents can cooperate well and are flexible in that gatekeeping and are more facilitative in their gatekeeping. When we run into more restrictive situations, that can be a problem. And I'll show you what this looks like. So in co-parenting and helping children have a best relationship with the other parent, on the left side here, we have what's called facilitative or open or, very flexible gatekeeping. And then on the other side, on the right side here, we have very restrictive. I guess I'll kind of just go over this a little bit. So facilitative or more of that open gatekeeping is doing things like speaking positively about another parent, updating the other parent about situations involving the kiddo, whether that's like, hey, kid's in a play, or hey, their dentist appointment is on Tuesday at noon. So making sure that information is being shared, asking the other parent if they need help. Sometimes I suggest that to the parents I'm working with and they're like, absolutely not, that's never going to happen. But I'll tell you, being proactive and asking the other parent if there's something that they need can be really beneficial for children because it shows children that parents are working together. One question was, can I send this to us? This is a piece of a bigger research article. Lola, I think I can send it to you in an email, and then could you? Yes, okay. When I send this information out, I say that any information can be used, its powers can be used for good and evil. So I will have the caveat that I do not want this information to be used for restrictive gatekeeping or as a weapon against anybody. So I will just put that caveat out there. But yes, I'm happy to share it. Being flexible and time sharing is another facilitative gatekeeping behavior. There's a great mediator in the area, and what she says about custody schedules is that a custody schedule is like the Monopoly rules. We all know how to play Monopoly, but you only check the rules if you really need to. And so being flexible, really helping the children, kind of create time for things that they need to go to, being flexible for things like holidays, family needs, vacations. We see children benefit when there's a lot of flexibility in that. So very restrictive, kind of going all the way to the other end. What gatekeeping behaviors do we not want to use? Severely, they're called alienating behaviors. So things like this would be stonewalling, blocking communication with another parent, degrading or marginalizing or talking badly about the other parent, rigid adherence to parenting time schedules down to the minute I've seen, not helping and facilitating things like contact or phone calls, not inviting the other parent to events for the child so they can't participate in that. Those would all be examples of very restrictive behaviors. So both parents can engage in these. I've seen both parents in some ways kind of put their foot in it. So if I've got a situation where trying to just think of a recent example. I had an example with the family where a kiddo was I think it was like a play at school or something like that. And the kiddo I think was like 6 or 7, so really not really not in a space where they can really share a whole lot of information with parents. That's going to come to the school. So one parent gets the information about the play. Child is in their care. They're going to take the child to the play, and the other parent did not receive that information. And the other parent, the parent who did not receive the information, blamed the other parent. And what I said to them was, how much involvement do you have in the child's school? Because I want to make sure that before a parent starts leaping on that is are they connected with teachers? Are they making efforts to get that information? Because sometimes the source of our frustration in parenting is not due to the actions of another person. It's probably because maybe we weren't doing what we needed to do. And I know that connecting with teachers and getting that school calendar and really paying attention to it, it takes a lot of effort, a lot of work. We're all busy. But if there's a way that a parent can handle their own stuff before they got to go to the other parent, I recommend that, and I will encourage it every single time. So as parents, if you are, if you're in a situation with a separated parent, please connect with the children's school. Know who their teachers are, get the calendar, know when the kids' events are. Connect with their doctors, know what medications they're on, know when their next appointment is. As a parent, if you have legal rights, you can just call up the doctor's office and get that. That should not be a problem. And you can definitely be getting that information so that, if a kid comes over and, he's got, a rash and you got to apply skin cream, you know what cream it is, you know how to use it. So things that you can do to make that easy on yourself by connecting directly with providers, definitely recommend that. Counseling, it comes up all the time with just in the world I'm in. One parent will take a kiddo to counseling and not involve the other parent. Because I work in this world, I'll tell you kind of the things I know is that both parents, ideally, both parents would receive consent for the counselor would obtain consent from both parents or counseling. In a perfect world, does it happen every time? But I often see that it doesn't happen. And then a parent says to me, well, other parent took the kid to counseling and didn't tell me. And the first thing I ask them is, well, have you talked to the counselor? So again, please make sure that you're connecting with the people who are involved in the children's lives so that you have the information and are not just relying on that one person to do all of the things for you. That's not fair to the other parent, and it actually solves a lot of our problems when we're way more engaged. Just kind of be mindful on time. It is 6:17. This was my last slide, I think. Yep, questions. Does anybody, let me stop sharing here. Does anybody have any additional questions for me? I know I covered a lot in a little bit of time. All right. Lola, I don't know if anything I said ties into what you're working on or.
Oh, it absolutely did. And
Okay.
I hope that people heard things and stuff that played into it. I'm going to ask a question that I get, maybe some people are afraid to ask, or because I do Google surveys and I ask what they'd like more information on. And from previous classes too, a lot of parents ask how they can better communicate with a parent who is not flexible or receptive of trying to communicate. What can they do to try to be more communicative with that parent?
Yeah, so there's a strategy that's been around for, oh gosh, 20 years. So it's kind of like the first go-to I use, and it's called BIF. I don't know, do you talk a little bit about that? Okay, I'll go over the whole thing. So BIF, if you just Google BIF technique, I think it's even, hey, look at that. Thank you, Ian. So
it doesn't work.
Well, it is on I think it's even on the Gottman website. Like they use it, like they do use it. So the idea of BIF is it's brief, informed, friendly, and firm. That's kind of the idea of it. And it's a way to interact with parents where there may be a lot of conflict in the co-parenting relationship. Is it a cure-all? Absolutely not, right? Like I definitely don't want to create that, but I think it does give a structure and kind of a guideline for what should we be incorporating into our communications with the other parent. Especially maybe when we're getting some not friendly communication from the other parent. I'm pouring a lot of sugar on that. For situations where a parent is non-communicative, which is probably one of the most frustrating situations, this would be another area where I would always recommend, please be involved with the people that your children are involved with. That includes their teachers, their coaches, their school, their doctors, their counselors. If you are not being involved in the ways that you can be, the other parent will be involved in a much greater way and you have less of a say. So I say, I know it's a lot of work, but please do yourself a favor and really be involved. You get the information, you don't have to ask your kiddo for it, which places them in a bad situation. And it makes, making, decisions and being involved a little easier overall.
I have to say that's a little more difficult than you say, because I've been trying to be involved in my kid's life, and she has kept information from me. She refuses to tell the court, and it's been a legal battle with her. So it's not as easy as just asking your doctor, because she refuses to give the information to me, or the doctor refuses to give it because she's put them under not her spell, but told them that I'm not allowed to have that information. So it's fighting somebody who's dug in, per se.
And I've definitely worked with parents where that is a real concern in a situation. So I definitely don't want to minimize that. In situations where a parent may be, may create an obstacle, I'll kind of put it that way, be creating obstacles around obtaining information, that may be where you're going to need some assistance with the co-parenting. Maybe a more clear order needs to be put in place. And I know that going through any legal options creates a lot of stress in itself. If it can be avoided, I say, if you can avoid court, don't do it, because I've worked with families that are in court who've been in court for a long time. It is just inherently a stressful, awful situation. But sometimes we need to go through that situation in order to have a clear order, in order to be able to be a part of our children's lives. So sometimes it is necessary. It sounds like you're probably going through that right now and experiencing all of the stress of that. My hope is that it works out in such a way that you do feel like you can be more involved in your kiddo's life in a positive way.
Yep. Thank you.
Yeah.
Michelle, do you have your hand up?
I do. I'm trying to learn how to handle my kid, like my 7-year-old. My husband my ex will say, like, how was your weekend? Did you get a bath? Nope, we didn't take a bath. We didn't sleep at all last night. We didn't. And then I get these texts saying, you're supposed to give the kids a bath. How come the kids didn't sleep last night? How come? And he's taking the word of a 7-year-old. And then when I get her, I'm like, hey, I'm trying not to involve her. I'll be like, so do you remember Saturday when, you took your shower and then your sister took her bath and we did this, that, and try to jog it? Yeah. Okay, well, Dad didn't know that you had taken your bath. I don't know how to get him to, like, you're taking the word of a 7-year-old that doesn't understand the concept of time or days of the week. Yesterday did you take a bath? I don't know. Maybe it was Tuesday, So I'm having a hard time co-parenting with him taking the word of a 7-year-old.
So there's a couple ways to handle it. I don't know your particular situation, so I don't know if any of these would work, but here's just some of my go-tos. So certainly with a 7-year-old, there's, kids are kind of thinking more immediate, black and white thinking. So if they didn't take a bath that day, usually the answer is no, right? Or children at those, school ages, they learn really quickly what the right answer is. What answer gets me more attention from mom? What answer gets me more attention from dad? And so even though, they just don't want more of a conversation, they just give the right answer and try to move about their day. Children are really smart. They figure this out. So how do you handle it with the other parent? Well, clearly, if the other parent, has a concern that is unfounded and is relying on the information of a 7-year-old where that may not be happening, I kind of go back to the BIF, is where you say, is there anything that I can do to let you know that this concern is being addressed? And you're putting it right back to them. And you're saying, I hear that you have a concern. How can I help? Right. And you're really making them do the problem solving work. And hearing their suggestion, you're saying, that suggestion works for me. Or, hey, no, that suggestion doesn't work for me. Here's what I'd like to do. So it gives you more control over the situation. So that's just like one communication technique to help address that is you're saying, hey, I'm not dismissing your concern. I see you got it, so that they can't fight with you on that. And saying, offer me a solution. I would love to be to manage this with you. And really, I don't know if you talked about the turning towards behaviors in the Gottman theory, but it's like turning towards behavior, it's saying, I want to work with you. I'm hoping that maybe by trying that, you might kind of come to a situation that works best for you. And that's a way you can even state like, hey, you know, this is what's going on. This is what's happening. You probably said that to your blue in the face, but, you know, but I understand that, you know, our kiddo is still telling you you're not getting a bath. How can I best help you, like, let you know that this concern, you know, that I'm hearing that you're concerned and can get you this information. Let's put it right back on the other parent.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. Any other questions? All right. Well, I think you only got a couple minutes left. So, well, I really appreciate you just inviting me down. I hope some of this information was helpful. I'll email you that. I'll just email you my whole slides, and then you can add that picture. If there are some great resources with this information of co-parenting. I know Ian had the BIF book. There's a lot of free information out there, just a lot of information you can pay for, but the stuff that's been around for years sometimes still works. So I would say just always, you know, just kind of as many resources you can get to support yourselves, then I would definitely encourage that. All right.
Thank you so much. This was so informative and wonderful. So thank you so much.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you all. I'll just hang out for a couple minutes just in case anybody does have any additional questions.